Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. EU's top diplomat Joseph Borrell comments on the Wagner mutiny, says the Putin-created beast is now acting against him and that Russia's military power is cracking. Russia's capital Moscow lifts anti-terrorist security regime that was imposed over the weekend when Wagner mercenaries announced a mutiny and threatened to storm the city. Sri Lanka declares a 5-day closure of financial markets starting Thursday ahead of its controversial move to restructure over $51 billion in domestic debt. Tech giants in Australia can face billions of dollars in fines for failing to tackle disinformation after a recently passed law aimed at bringing mandatory regulations to the digital space. The cash-rich Saudi Pro League bags another Premier League star. Senegal captain Kalidou Koulibaly joins Al Hilal from Chelsea on a 3-year deal. Greece's Conservative Party has won the parliamentary election. With maximum votes, it gained 158 seats in the 300-seat parliament. New Democracy Party leads the votes with 40.5%, which is more than 20 points clear of the radical leftist party Syriza. Later today, the New Democratic Party leader, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, will be sworn in as Prime Minister. Mitsotakis has vowed to boost revenue from the tourist industry, create more jobs and increase wages to near the European Union average. Mitsotakis was the Prime Minister from 2019 until he stepped down in favour of a caretaker Premier. He's also pledged to rebuild the economical condition of the country after the debt crisis wrecked the nation for a decade.
The citizens have many problems, and they demand that we give our full attention to those problems and solve them. And today, I am the Prime Minister of all Greeks, and I express the expectations even of the citizens that did not vote for us.
Yesterday's vote was a huge defeat for Alexis Tsipras's Syriza party, as it had lost more than 30 lawmakers in the parliament. Apart from this, yesterday's vote also witnessed the entry of 3 fringe right wings and nationalist parties, which include an anti-immigration party dubbed as Spartans. In total, these parties have won more than 35 seats. Thousands of supporters gathered outside the party headquarters. On the streets, it was nothing less than a huge party. Cars drove by honking cars, honking their horns and waving party flags.
I am very happy. It is very good that a new democracy is re-elected. Only a new democracy, nothing else.
Today's victory is amazing. It is unprecedented. It is justice for Mitsotakis for the way he handled all issues during this 4-year term.
Mitsotakis is due to visit President Katerina Sakellaopoulou to receive a mandate to form a government. The new cabinet is also expected to be announced later today. UK's National Health Service is again under the radar. A study has found that UK citizens die sooner from cancer and heart diseases than people in other rich countries. The main reason is stated as the lack of beds and staff. According to a report by the King's Fund think tank, the NHS has been affected by years of underinvestment, while adding the number of avoidable deaths could have been prevented had patients received better treatment. The study includes 19 rich countries, and it concluded that Britain has below average health outcomes because it spends less. The report compares the resources available to the NHS across the UK and with those of the health systems in countries including France, Germany, Sweden, Japan, Singapore and the US. Apart from this, the King's Fund also acknowledged that the NHS's lack of doctors and nurses is another one of the main reasons as to why the service is struggling. Later this week, the UK government is also expected to publish its long-awaited reports on the NHS. The UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak touted it as one of the most significant announcements in the history of the NHS. Well, for more on this, we're joined by our correspondent Alex Isat in London. And Alex, this is quite a shocking report. The NHS is obviously world famous, but is in not good state at the moment.
Absolutely not. Sadly, it does seem to have been crumbling apart for the past few years. Now, that report also states that it's not just medical staff that the NHS in the UK is lacking, but it's also equipment and facilities, things like MRIs, scans and extra beds, those things that the NHS should have, especially for a country as rich as the UK that's just not having them. Now, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, did say that we were going to get 50,000 extra nurses, trying to get them, encouraging them into the NHS workforce, but the workforce has been declining, specifically as well since COVID, when a lot of nurses decided that they were going to leave the profession. They were working over the hours that they were meant to. They were doing zero contract shifts, and there was a lot of stress and anxiety within the role itself. You know, we have seen here especially the strikes from the nurses, from the NHS, from the staff, ambulance workers throughout the last couple of months, and those conversations about junior doctors striking are still ongoing. So there is a lot of problems with the NHS itself, and whether or not there's billions of pounds, there was talk from one of the health secretaries that there was going to be billions of pounds put into the NHS, but it is the people, and if those people aren't coming, then unfortunately the NHS is not going to survive. And at the moment there may well be 50,000 nurses expected, but there isn't actually a route for them to come on board. From what I understand, a lot of the universities who are trying to teach new doctors specifically are also pandering to a lot of these alternative ways of teaching. I was speaking to a doctor up in Nottingham, and she was teaching and said that there was already a trigger warning on some of the doctor classes that there may well be blood shown, and that is a worrying concern for our future doctors. If they're going through university, are they going to be finishing if that's not really the career they want? So it does feel like the NHS is slowly falling apart, and today we heard as well that the independent review suggested that there should be a pay rise of up to 6% for NHS workers going on from next year, but the government has not said whether that they will implement that. And although obviously the Conservatives may or may not be in power this time next year, the Labour Party as well, who would be the next alternative, they haven't said whether or not they would give that 6% as well. So there's a lot of problems within the NHS. It isn't just the lack of people, it's the lack of equipment, it's also how people are being dealt with on day to day. So surprisingly, although this is quite a sad report, it's not that surprising.
Alex Isaac joining us live there from London, many thanks. British people are staring at a seemingly endless summer of sun. 5 more heat waves are expected to bake the United Kingdom this year, with sizzling hot weather until September. A heat wave is an extended period of hot weather relative to the expected conditions of the area at that time of year, which may be accompanied by high humidity. A UK heatwave threshold is met when an area records at least 3 consecutive days with daily maximum temperatures meeting or exceeding the heatwave temperature threshold. City dwellers flocked to the seaside as temperatures rose above 30 degrees Celsius in London and southern English cities, and it encouraged people to head for the water. Beaches in the popular resort town of Brighton were packed and temperatures a few degrees cooler.
It's unwise to say it's too late, because that gives everyone no hope at all. But I think we've got to adjust to probably a climate hotter than we've agreed to in the various conventions and so on. I think we have to take some steps and acknowledge that that's the way it's going to go. Of course, we should do our best to prevent it, but it's unlikely to happen without a huge change in consumer behaviour.
Quoting the weather company, the Mirror newspaper stated further heatwaves are expected in early and late July. The forecasters expect 2 more in the first half of August, before it hots up again in September. Blistering temperatures are predicted for up to 14 days in July and could beat last year's record-breaking 40.3 degrees Celsius that was seen in Lincolnshire. The UK Met Office said extreme temperatures are not out of the question, with the mercury boosted by hot continental air. Political drama continues over the Wagner crisis ahead of a NATO summit in Lithuania next month. President Biden and Zelensky discussed the revolt in Russia. The US and its allies are now taking on Putin's authority in the aftermath of the mutiny that erupted last week. Meanwhile, Moscow lifted an anti-terrorist security regime imposed over the weekend, where mutinous Wagner mercenaries threatened to storm the city. Russian state TV broadcast footage of Defence Minister inspecting the Russian troops. Shoigu, a target of fierce criticism by Prigozhin, went to command post in Ukraine. The Wagner mercenaries headed back to their base after Vladimir Putin agreed to allow their leader to avoid treason charges and accept exile. Belarus brokered the agreement to avert Moscow's most serious security crisis in decades. The intervention by President Lukashenko, seen as Putin's junior partner, embarrassed the Kremlin, while the Wagner boss, Prigozhin, exactly his whereabouts now remain unclear. Analysts say the revolt showed that Putin's rule is more fragile than thought of earlier. A top EU diplomat said Wagner's aborted mutiny shows Moscow's Ukraine war is splintering, and it's splintering Russian power and creating instability in the nuclear-armed power, and that is not a good thing.
Is that the war against Ukraine, launched by Putin, and the monster that Putin created with the Wagner, the monster is biting him now. The monster is acting against his creator. The political system is showing the fragilities, and the military power is cracking. So this is an important consequence of the war in Ukraine.
Well, here's how other prominent leaders are reacting. The US Secretary of State said Wagner's short-lived uprising marked a direct challenge to Putin's authority. Antony Blinken flagged real cracks in Russian state authority. French President Macron said the march on Moscow shows divisions within the Russian camp and the fragility of both its military and its auxiliary forces. Beijing has maintained close ties with Moscow since the Ukraine operation was launched. Foreign Minister Qin Gang met Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko in Beijing. The Chinese Foreign Ministry called the mercenary revolt Russia's internal affair and expressed support for Putin's government. As I mentioned earlier, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Joe Biden discussed the revolt ahead of a NATO summit in Lithuania next month. Zelensky said, and I quote, "The world must put pressure on Russia until international order is restored." Kiev, however, said that unrest offered a window of opportunity for its counter-offensive. Meanwhile, quoting the UK security sources, British media reported Russian intelligence services threatened to harm families of Wagner leaders. Wagner had only 8,000 fighters instead of the 25,000 claimed and faced likely defeat in any attempt to take the Russian capital. Reports further suggest Putin will now try to assimilate the Wagner soldiers into the Russian military. Two big questions remain unanswered, however. Was any formal deal struck, and will the Russian defence minister be demoted or sacked as demanded by Prigozhin? At least 50 people were detained by Turkish police after Istanbul's LGBTQ community defied a ban and carried out their annual Pride March. Pride Parade has been banned in Istanbul this year, along with other cities, as Erdogan's regime continues its crackdown against the community. Hundreds of people defied the ban on the Pride Parade in Istanbul and gathered in rainbow-coloured flags to celebrate Pride Month. The group gathered at the Mistrik Park ahead of the traditional venue of Istiklal Avenue before organisers called on them to disperse. The change of venue followed deployment of the riot police at the traditional venues. The organisers reported at least one person was hit on the head while being detained. Previously, police detained at least 44 people in the coastal city of Izmir, the country's third largest, after authorities banned the Pride March. Homosexuality, although not a crime in Turkey, is still on the receiving end of crackdowns and widespread hostility. President Erdogan's government has toughened its stance on LGBTQ+ freedoms, making it tougher for the community to thrive and exist. Over the years, the Conservative government tightened their grip over Pride parades, along with other community activities. Istanbul Governor Davut Gül earlier this month took to Twitter to further these views, while saying that any activity threatening the traditional family structure would not be allowed.
Muammer Bey'imi arayayım derken neyi kastediyordunuz? Neyi kastediyordunuz? Lütfen arar mısınız?
Madagascar's president is facing heavy criticism after a leaked document showed the president, André Rajoelina, is French. The leak suggests that he obtained a French nationality in a deal with Paris in 2014. Rajoelina has been accused of a lack of transparency. The head of state has been urged to clarify the issue. His alleged dual citizenship has caused a stir in the island nation. Madagascar's laws say anyone who acquires citizenship of a foreign country automatically loses their Madagascar nationality. The opposition parties say the functions of a president of the republic can only fall to a citizen of Madagascar nationality, while referring to Article 46 of the Madagascar Constitution. Rajoelina's own party has urged its leader to speak on the matter, as they claim now it's a matter of sovereignty of the Madagascan people. The President's Chief of Staff described the leak as an undoubted political move. He also added that Rajoelina was born to a Malagasy mother and father, and the President is French on the side of his great-grandfather. Rajoelina seized power in an uprising in 2009. In 2014 he left the office in an agreement brokered by Paris. But in 2018 he made a comeback in politics after winning the presidential election. Glastonbury 2023 is finally over, but it will go down as one of the greatest headline shows in the music festival's history. And the credit for that goes to none other than Elton John. The 76-year-old British musician played his final UK show on the Pyramid stage on June 25th, taking to the stage in front of one of the biggest Glastonbury crowds since the Rolling Stones headlined in 2013. The Rocket Man's singer pulled out all the stops, with surprise guests and a set crammed full of his greatest hits. Fans were in awe of the singer as he performed some of his biggest hits like Benny and the Jets, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, and Your Song.
I've grown up with his music from my parents, we love it, and yeah, it was really emotional. I was so excited. This is my 10th Glastonbury, so it's the perfect way to end my 10th Glastonbury.
Well, he was emotional. You could tell it from when he was talking to the crowd at the beginning, and when the crowd gave him the emotion back. So it was just lovely, lovely to see.
Elton John also stunned the crowd as he paid a heartfelt tribute to the late singer George Michael on what would have been his 60th birthday. He dedicated his performance of Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me to Michael, during which he got a little emotional. But that was not all. His guest stars, Rina Sawayama and Steven Sanchez, accompanied the singer on stage, while the scripted history and he played one of Glastonbury's greatest headline shows. Shifting tracks to tennis now, and Carlos Alcaraz fired a Wimbledon warning to his rivals with a maiden title win on the grass at Queen's Club in London, and he regained with it his #1 world ranking. Well, Alcaraz was playing in his maiden grass court final and was given a tough test by the world number 18 Alex de Minaur in the opening set. Sensational play from both saw the first 8 games go with serve. A misplaced open backhand from de Minaur saw Alcaraz taking the first service break of the match at 5-4, and the Spaniard held firm to serve out the set 6-4 after 49 minutes. Alcaraz took a medical timeout ahead of the second set. A first double fault from de Minaur saw Alcaraz take the break that he was seeking in the 7th game, and that proved to be the turning point in the final. Even though de Minaur produced some good serves and rally shots to keep himself in the set, it wasn't enough to stop Alcaraz, who went out to close a 6-4, 6-4 victory after an hour and 39 minutes, and it continues his blistering form ahead of Wimbledon. With the victory, the 20-year-old leapfrogged Novak Djokovic back to the top of the world rankings, and will go into the 3rd Grand Slam of the year as the top seed.
Championship, Carlos Alcaraz.
Well, the chances doesn't change so much, you know. I mean, Novak is coming to Wimbledon, so I mean, right now I'm feeling better, you know, than the beginning of the week. That's obviously, of course, recovering the #1 before Wimbledon, you know, gives you extra motivation and gives you extra confidence, you know, coming into Wimbledon. But you know, it doesn't change too much, you know, if I play Wimbledon as a #2 or as a #1.
Well, it's getting very exciting close to Wimbledon now. We can't wait. Thank you very much for joining us here on WION Live Broadcast from London. I've been Oliver Regan. Thanks for joining us.